Hello everyone, welcome back. We are here back for round 7 of the Pokémon 2020 Malmö Regional Championships. We're going to be getting straight over to the players here, getting them introduced, getting to know them, and then we're going to be going straight into round 7. Only one more round to go after this, so without further ado, here's your first player for round 7, Eric Rios.
So here, looking at his accomplishments, a lot of them have actually been in the 2020 format again. So definitely, he's already on his way doing very, very well.
Exactly that, and you see 2019 World Championships top 8, he made it all the way into day 2 of the Pokemon World Championships and even further into the top cut, making it through top 16 into top 8. Unfortunately didn't make it any further than that, but still a fantastic accomplishment and someone really to look out for. No surprise that Eric is sitting here at 6-0, but also we have the Paris special event in the 2020 season, as well as the LATAM International Championships. Top 4 performance there in again in the 2020 format, and a top 8 in the most recent Oceania International Championships in Series 2 of VGC 2020.
Yeah, so he's been doing very, very well, and he's on his way to do it again.
Exactly that, and your second player coming up representing Germany here is Tobias Koschitzki coming out here, and a little bit of an older set of achievements there, but no less relevant. We see a top 16 world performance there in the 2015 season, a couple of other performances there from the 2015 and 16 season.
Yeah, definitely, the German nationals, he seemed to, both years in a row, he's done very, very well. He's got second, he's got fourth, and then again in London Internet, he was in top 8, so that's definitely, he's been really consistent if you kind of look at that. And now, again, being incredibly well going here, 6-0 right now.
Exactly that. So we have the teams up on the screen in team preview. We have on Eric's side of the field, Dragapult, Snorlax, Rotom, Washform, Aegislash, Togekiss, and Mimikyu.
Yeah, and on Tobias' side we have that Butterfree, which is able to Gigantamax, the Dusclops, and also that Hatterene, which is possibly an option as well. Rhyperior, Choco, and that female Indeedee.
Indeed. So we have Tobias looking like he's opting for more a Trick Room strategy, trying to reverse the speeds of everything on the field and maybe do a lot of damage with that Common Core that we've seen all the way through Series 2 of VGC 2020 of Rhyperior and Torkoal. Rear passer, Eric, running that team of that we've seen quite similar to Alex Gomez's team that we featured slightly earlier in the day, going to be potentially using that Dragapult in the same way. Of course, has that Snorlax to do some work in Trick Room, known for being very slow. So if Tobias is going to be setting up that Trick Room, he's going to have to worry about that Snorlax.
Yeah, definitely if it wants to go for something like Belly Drum, that's definitely not something that you want to face when you're in Trick Room. So Tobias leading with that Dusclops and Butterfree combination, while Eric here goes for that Dragapult and Rotom Wash.
Rotom Wash indeed, and the Frisk bringing out the Citrus Berry and Weakness policy there on Eric's side of the field, so some really good information coming off right at the start of the game for Tobias. Butterfree known for using things like Rage Powder to redirect big attacks away from Dusclops, so it's able to set up that Trick Room. So Eric obviously knows this is a potential, and we have seen Alex use that Dragon Darts move, which hits twice. So if Dragapult on Eric's side of the field is opting for the same kind of moveset as Alex, that could be something that we see going into turn 1.
Yeah, immediately seeing a Dynamax here come out from that Dragapult. Definitely a mon that we've seen Dynamaxing quite a lot. It's an incredibly speedy Pokemon, meaning that it will probably move first, if not as second, and immediately storing so much damage. Here we see it go first with that max airstream into the Butterfree, is able to hang on with 1 HP, possibly that Focus Sash, which made it hang on like exactly that. Exactly that Focus Sash, always very important, having to make sure that you pretty much live any attack coming out at you. It will be raising the speed here on Eric's side as Rotom goes for a Thunderbolt, doubling up into that Butterfree, making sure that it can't go for any Sleep Powder. Exploders or anything similar to that, as we do see Dusclops now setting up that Trick Room.
Yeah, slightly counterintuitive. Eric would have been able to see the Trick Room coming from Dusclops, and counterintuitive that you'd be raising your speed in answer to that. But of course, as you say, Romy, you don't want any Pokemon put to sleep, and that's exactly what Eric has made sure isn't going to happen, removing that Butterfree from the field. Of course, now potentially going to have to do a little bit of moving things around and making sure that Eric's able to live out the Trick Room for the next 4 turns as Hatterene enters the field for Tobias. So some big attacks potentially coming off here. Hatterene is known for having quite a strong special attacking stat, so might be something that we see doing lots of damage. Usually something that does set the Trick Room, but not always do we see it really taking advantage of that big special attack stat.
Yeah, so kind of do you think Dragapult can kind of, here do in this situation? Just that it is facing down that Hatterene and Trick Room as well.
Well, it is in its Dynamax form, and so, it's got double HP. It may be able to survive those big fairy attacks coming out from something like the Hatterene, but we do see Rotom come out for that Mimikyu.
Yeah, so here Mimikyu may be trying to go for a reversal of the Trick Room maybe later on. We do see Tobias also going for his Dynamax option here. We're going to see which one it is, probably the Hatterene, and yes, that's exactly what we're going to see.
Yeah, Gigantamax Hatterene coming out there, so has access to its G-Max move.
Smite?
G-Max Smite, that's it. So we'll see if that comes out as a Will-O-Wisp comes into the Mimikyu slot.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good thing here for Tobias. Immediately burning that Mimikyu, having its attack stats coming out from it, as we are going to see that Smite being launched into the Dragapult in the Dynamax form, is able to lift it, but it will now have a chance to confuse the opponents, which it will now do. So this Mimikyu definitely in a bad position here, being burned, being confused, but we are going to see that weakness policy proc here on that Dragapult.
Exactly that, and Dragapult is confused. Will he get through the confusion? Yes, he will, and Max Phantasm comes onto the Hatterene and picks up the knockout.
Yeah, with that weakness policy, raising its attack stat by 2 stages, was now able to take immediately down the Gigantamax form of Hatterene here. So Tobias not really getting a lot of out of that Gigantamax, only really getting up 1 Smite, but that actually, may still be enough, since it did confuse, both the Dragapult and the Mimikyu, which could be turning to be quite important.
Indeed, Rhyperior coming out here from Tobias, and something that you definitely want to see coming into Trick Room. We've seen quite a lot of Dusclops opt for moves that proc weakness policies, so if that's what Tobias has got on his Rhyperior, that's going to be able to do so much damage. Mimikyu, of course, on Eric's side of the field has been burnt, so not going to be doing too much damage, but it does have that disguise intact. So, there's only 3 more turns of Trick Room left, so it may be that Eric's able to live out this Trick Room.
Yeah, so Dragapult is going to be going for that max card. Really wants to kind of use this last turn to make sure that it doesn't faint here. But as we do see that Break going into Rhyperior is going to be proccing its own weakness policy here, as it goes for that Rock Slide. So it's going to be going into the max card of that Dragapult, but it is going to be hitting that Mimikyu's disguise, breaking it now, just making sure that hopefully next turn he can quite easily deal with it and make sure that he really utilizes his turns of Trick Room.
Exactly that. So Mimikyu hurt itself in confusion. It's had its disguise broken, and of course we're doubling up on chances here, because there's also that flinch chance potentially coming out from the Rock Slide on Rhyperior. So really good turn there, identifying on Tobias' side of the field that Rock Slide would be enough to pick up the Dragapult. KO on the Dragapult, wanted to use the attack on Dusclops to activate the weakness policy and get himself in a great position. Probably going to see Rhyperior go for a Dynamax a little bit later in... Oh, no, can't go for a Dynamax anymore because of Hatterene's Gigantamax. So we're probably going to see a bit more Rock Slide coming out onto the field, maybe some Earthquake, making sure he doesn't miss. Will-O-Wisp, though, coming out from Dusclops.
Is going to be avoided by the Dragapult as the Rock Slide misses the Mimikyu, but it is enough to pick up the KO on the very big threat that is Dragapult.
Exactly that, and Mimikyu's confused. Will it be able to get through this turn? It will, and goes for a Phantom Force.
You're definitely a really good play here, just making sure that, Mimikyu just disappears for a turn here and kind of make sure that it gets out of that Trick Room alive.
Exactly that, and probably going to be trying to do quite a bit of damage to that Dusclops. Phantom Force is super effective, so even though it's burnt, all of these turns matter. That Dusclops hasn't taken any damage yet, so everything that Eric can do to stop that Trick Room coming up again has to be done at this stage. Question is whether that Rotom will be able to survive some big attacks coming out from Rhyperior, because a Rhyperior doesn't really like seeing Hydro Pump come in its direction, and there's no reason for Eric not to go for that, given that the weakness policy on Rhyperior has already been activated.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best player. If he, can quite comfortably deal with Rhyperior, he can maybe try to make sure that, there's only Dusclops, which doesn't have a lot of offensive pressure, as Brick Break is going to be going into the protect of that Rotom, as I missed actually the move that Rhyperior
Hammer Arm coming out there.
Hammer Arm there coming out from the Rhyperior as the Phantom Force goes there into the with a critical hit. Definitely really, really important here.
Yeah, that did so much damage to the Dusclops. As the Trick Room returns to normal, now Mimikyu may be able to remove Dusclops from the field, stop that Trick Room in combination with an attack from Rotom. If that's the case, Rhyperior is in a really sticky situation. But there's a decision to be made from Tobias here, whether or not to protect that Rhyperior, because of course, if that Dusclops goes down and Rhyperior protects, then it's not likely to be able to protect again. But this may be the opportunity for, even outside of Trick Room, Rhyperior to get some big attacks off, maybe get into the last couple of turns without taking any more damage.
Yeah, so Rhyperior is going to go for a protect here as Mimikyu snapped out his confusion, fires off a play rough here into the Dusclops as Rotom goes for the Hydro Pop that is going to be missing, meaning that the Dusclops does have the opportunity to set up Trick Room again, definitely putting Eric kind of back on the back burner again.
It is, and I actually don't mind the Hydro Pump there. You have to make sure that your attack from Rotom gets the KO on Dusclops, and we know exactly how bulky Dusclops is. So, risk versus reward. If your Thunderbolt is not likely to pick up the knockout, then it's absolutely best to go for that Hydro Pump, which is exactly what Eric did. Protect, though, coming out from this Rotom.
Yeah, as Mimikyu goes for Shadow Sneak, we're going to see if it's enough to pick up the KO. At least Dusclops is now going to be removed from the field. But Eric is still facing down that Rhyperior in Trick Room. Well, it is going to be going for that Rock Slide. It will go into the protect of the Rotom, but it will pick up here the knockout on that Mimikyu, meaning that we are going to see the last Pokemon that Eric brought here.
We are, and I'm not sure whether that was the right decision to protect there, but you want to be making sure that while it's a bit spread, the spread damage is going off, that you can do as much damage as possible. Snorlax coming in, though, may have access to some ground moves, has learnt those in the past formats, so depend on exactly how Eric's trained his Snorlax as to whether he's going to be able to do super effective damage to this Rhyperior. Of course, Rhyperior isn't going to be able to do any damage to Rotom with something like an Earthquake, so does have to stick to Rock Slide if he wants to make sure he's doing maximum damage to that Rotom, and probably looking for some flinches here if he can try to get a couple of attacks off and make sure that the Trick Room doesn't expire.
Yeah, so a Hammer Arm here coming out from the Rhyperior onto the Rotom will lower its own speed here, quite maybe importantly in that Trick Room here, but now Rotom is going to be healing back that Citrus Bomb, and Snorlax goes for a Seed Bomb here onto the Rhyperior, which is going to be living with 6 HP. This time Hydro Pump from Rotom is connecting and should be enough to pick up the KO here on that Rhyperior.
Absolutely. So yeah, game one goes to Eric in a really commanding fashion, actually. Tobias looking like he was going to be able to, partway through that game, really put pressure on with that Gigantamax Hatterene, but unfortunately wasn't quite enough to pick up the KO on that Dragapult, and just a testament to how well Eric has trained his Dragapult to be able to live those big attacks.
Yeah, so Tobias was able to kind of, get up that Trick Room twice, but he still really wasn't able to utilize it enough for him to kind of get that advantage over Eric here. So what do you kind of think does he have to switch up his Pokemon, or maybe try some other strategies to kind of try to make sure that he really utilizes his Trick Room turns well?
Well, I think there's got to be a little bit of chip damage going on onto that Dragapult as soon as possible. We saw that Brick Break was the attacking move of choice for Tobias in that last game. It may indicate that there wasn't any other ways for Dusclops to hit that Dragapult and get the extra damage he needed off. So, Tobias may need to go back to the drawing board. It may be that it was the move was slightly in Eric's favor, and on another game it would have picked up the KO with that G-Max Smite. But we'll have to see. Tobias and Eric know their Pokemon, know how they've been trained, so likely we'll know the answer to that question, and we'll just have to see how they react to it. But I do think it's going to be all about that Dragapult, making sure that it gets KO'd in a timely fashion under Trick Room, making sure that Hatterene has the most advantage that it can and gets the most out of its Gigantamax turns.
Yeah, so Tobias did decide to go for that Gigantamax on his Hatterene, so he wasn't really able to do late game with something like Rhyperior. Do you think that might maybe something that he could try to switch up? Maybe try to make sure that in the end, he has that bulk and offensive pressure to kind of still deal with the rest of Eric's team?
I certainly could. I mean, the weakness policy coming out and was self-propped with Tobias later game in Trick Room, and of course we've seen quite a lot. Rhyperior with weakness policy and activated in its Dynamax form under Trick Room is an absolute powerhouse, and certainly something that Tobias' team lends itself to. So we'll have to see if Tobias likes that option, but we did see Seed Bomb coming out from Snorlax, and of course under Trick Room Snorlax is naturally faster than that Rhyperior once the speeds are reversed. So, something that Tobias has to be absolutely mindful of, and has to be really careful of trying to position himself in front of.
Yeah, it's actually like looking at his team, like his whole team just pretty much functions on the Trick Room. So it's also like really hard for him to kind of not go for that Trick Room, because he's kind of going to be like having a really hard time kind of dealing with all the other Pokemon that are on Eric's side.
Well, the other thing that you've got there is we used Butterfree in this turn for the form of redirection from Tobias. Actually, that Indeedee is another option, and Eric having 3 Ghost Pokemon and Indeedee being a redirect with Follow Me, as well as being a normal type, could be really powerful in this game.
Yeah, so maybe that's definitely something Tobias could switch up, and we are going to see that Dusclops and Butterfree joining the field for Tobias, as the Mimikyu and the Dragapult are going to be the lead for Eric.
Yeah, so probably going to see a pretty similar sort of tactic coming out from Tobias' side of the field. No reason to change it up. It worked. It worked to set up Trick Room in the last game, and even if it didn't come to fruition and give Tobias the win, definitely the condition that Tobias wants in play. So, this time we've got a slightly different lead matchup from Eric deciding to go for that Mimikyu instead of that Rotom Wash. So potentially the Dragapult could go for something like a Max Phantasm if it wants to go straight for that Dynamax turn 1 again. And of course, we have seen Shadow Sneak come out from Mimikyu, so doesn't need to use that Max Airstream this time.
Yeah, so we are immediately going to see that Dynamax, which we've seen so often see that beautiful Dragapult do, and it's going to be that really beautiful Dragapult. Going to be doing a lot of damage maybe if it tries to go for another Max Airstream, which we saw in Game 1 was pretty much enough to get Butterfree until its Focus Sash. We do see Mimikyu go for a Shadow Sneak here into the Butterfree, making sure that the Focus Sash is procced there, as Dragapult follows it up with a Max Phantasm.
Exactly that, and the Butterfree is definitely not going to be surviving that Max Phantasm this turn. We'll see if the Dusclops opted for the Trick Room in the same way that it was before, and it does exactly. So Trick Room is going up again. One thing I do want to note, we didn't see the Rage Powder coming out from Tobias' side of the field, and actually a really smart play, because of course if you're expecting the redirection from coming out from the Butterfree, sometimes you split your targeting and maybe you wouldn't be able to knock out that Butterfree turn 1. So great read there from Eric, deciding to target into the Butterfree, not giving Tobias an opportunity to get that sleep powder off if Eric was going to target slightly differently than he did last game. Rhyperior though coming in for the Butterfree, going to be under Trick Room, and we'll see if it goes for exactly the same as before, getting that Brick Break off, maybe going for its Dynamax form and launching off some big max Quakes, or whether Dusclops wants to maybe go for that Will-O-Wisp again into the Mimikyu.
Yeah, so we are going to be seeing that a Dynamax here come out from the bias side. Probably going to be that Rhyperior that we've seen it do a lot, and is now definitely going to really be a threat for Eric, especially if Dusclops again goes for that Brick Break.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see whether the Brick Break comes out from Dusclops this turn, as Dragapult goes for a Max Guard.
Yeah, not wanting to take possibly any really strong attacks here from that boosted Rhyperior coming out. We do see that Brick Break activating that weakness policy, will be raising the Rhyperior's attack by and special attack by 2 stages. Now it does fire off a Max Quake into that Max Guard, making sure that we will actually see a reversal of the Trick Room coming out. So no more Trick Room here up for Tobias. So definitely a really smart player from Eric. You know, just protecting his Dragapult, making sure that it's still at full health while it tries and to revert the Trick Room.
Exactly, and we've already seen a Max Phantasm come out from that Dragapult. So Dusclops on Tobias' side of the field is at a lowered stage of defense there. We've seen previously Mimikyu using Shadow Sneak to proc a weakness policy, but no, it's going to go into that Dusclops. Will it be followed up by the Dragapult?
So we are going to see the Dragapult following up with a Max Wormwind this time, making sure that, okay, this time it's not enough to pick up the KO on that Dusclops, but it will lower the attack of that Rhyperior, which could definitely be crucial, since this Rhyperior is at was at +2 attack and now only at +1, maybe making sure that now he does lift a little bit more moves. It will still be doing over half damage, meaning that another one should still be enough to pick up the KO on that Dragapult if he wants to go for that.
Exactly, and we see the Trick Room going up. So Trick Room going up once, being undone, and then going up again. Yeah, you see there the trade-off from Eric, trying to go for that Max Wormwind, make sure his Dragapult survives the turn. Unfortunately, not quite being able to pick up the knockout on Dusclops, and just showcasing how powerful Dusclops is. Of course, Mimikyu hasn't had its disguise broken yet, so if it wants to, it may be able to reverse the Trick Room yet again. We'll see if Dusclops decides to go for the Trick Room to counter that. Of course, you know, you can undo it and then reset it straight away. So some real mind games coming up from both players here. But in the meantime, of course, Eric's going to have to worry about another Max Quake potentially coming out, or a Max Rockfall from that Rhyperior.
Yeah, so Rhyperior does go for that Max Rockfall, picking up the KO this time on that Dragapult. So we are now going to be having that send up again. Also, you know, going to be doing a little bit of chip damage every turn that it is up now, as we do see Dusclops using Trick Room again. So now it's going to see if that Mimikyu also did it, and it did. So definitely a really good player. You know, you really does have those mind games of, is my opponent going to try to reset that Trick Room? And definitely a good read here on Eric's side, that he was like, I'm too scared of the, you know, the Trick Room going up again. I'm just gonna try to reverse it.
Yeah, so great read there from Tobias. Always a risky play, setting up Trick Room while you're in Trick Room and reversing it, but Tobias made exactly the right play there. So, you know, whether or not Mimikyu goes for a potential Shadow Sneak into this Dusclops to remove it from the field, let that Rotom go for Hydro Pump into the Rhyperior. Just whether or not Eric knows if his Rotom will be able to survive a 1+ Rock Slide from that Rhyperior or not. So, some real decisions to be made for Eric. Still 4 turns of Trick Room to be gotten through.
Yeah, but we actually see Pain Split here coming out from that Dusclops, while Rhyperior is following up with a Rock Slide, is now enough to pick up the knockout on that Rotom here on Eric's side, while Mimikyu's Disguise is now finally going to be broken.
It is, and we'll see what Mimikyu decides to do. Unfortunately, nothing this turn as a round of Sandstorm chip damage goes on to Mimikyu and Dusclops. Yeah, quite fortunate there for Tobias, but part of the reason that you use Rock Slide on a team is for these sort of things to happen. Snorlax, though, coming in, going to be able to put a lot of pressure on.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of seeing it maybe if it this time wants to try and set up, or it just wants to go for a lot of damage. Going for something like really strong, like Double Edge, should still do a lot of damage to either this Rhyperior or the Dusclops.
Yeah, and the question is whether Shadow Sneak from Mimikyu is enough to pick up the knockout onto Dusclops to avoid a Will-O-Wisp coming onto Snorlax to stop the Snorlax KOing the Rhyperior.
But instead we see a Pain Split here coming out from Dusclops as Rhyperior goes for that high horsepower onto Mimikyu. Enough here to pick up the KO, meaning that Eric is now down to his last Pokemon with that Snorlax. It doesn't have the opportunity to go for its Seed Bomb, but it's not enough to pick up the KO on that Rhyperior here.
Yeah, and you see the value of Plane Split coming out here for Tobias, making sure he's at full HP again, and Eric not deciding to go for that Shadow Sneak. Seed Bomb not quite picking up the KO, and a couple of turns of Trick Room left, so going to be a little bit of an opportunity for Eric to take down that Rhyperior, but there could be the Hatterene in the back, and Eric knows that, deciding to forfeit instead.
Yeah, so Tobias here really utilizing that Trick Room a little bit better, but also definitely utilizing Pain Split. Like, it's definitely, a move that we don't really see that often, but it seems to be like really, really important for him. In the case that he's itself very low health, but his opponents have a lot of health, he can really heal back almost to full health, even though he was only had a little bit of HP left.
Yeah, exactly, and that makes such a difference, especially that Snorlax is a normal type Pokemon and doesn't affect the Dusclops, so hey, maybe the game takes quite a while, but that Dusclops usually going to be able to outlive the Snorlax in an endgame, so could have been planning for that. Maybe, of course, we saw the Will-O-Wisp before as well, so stop the Snorlax doing too much damage either.
Yeah, that's definitely would have been a good play there from Tobias, but Eric really realizing there's really not much he can do. He has to go back to the drawing board, kind of maybe switching some things up here going into Game 3. So kind of what would you like to see from Eric?
Well, really, I'd like to see Eric doing a sort of similar thing to what he did in that match, but just getting those Trick Room predictions correct. We saw that the Max Wormwind, while it was able to preserve the Dragapult in that game to stop the Max Quake taking the knockout, it also meant that the Trick Room went back up again, and I think that was ultimately Eric's downfall. So what I'd like to see is probably just a little bit of a mix-up in how Eric was playing. Make sure that Trick Room, even if it goes up the first time, doesn't stay up, and then Eric's able to just be on the front foot and carry on doing lots of damage to Tobias' side of the field.
Yeah, so we are going to see if they decided to switch some things up or that they really are sure about their game plan here. So we are going to see that Indeedee here come out, like we were just talking between Game 1 and Game 2, but Eric actually deciding that Mimikyu and Dragapult, that's for him definitely the way to go. We are going to see Indeedee set up that Psychic Surge, meaning that Mimikyu can no longer go for things like Shadow Sneak. And we are actually going to see an item here proc that Psychic Seed is now going to raise its special defenses.
Exactly, so Ghost types are great unless you're up against a normal type Pokemon, and that's exactly what Indeedee is. So a switch up there coming from Tobias and saving that for Game 3, having that mix-up, doing something slightly different where Eric decides to go for exactly the same thing that he went for in Game 2. So, yeah, great switch up there from Tobias, and it's going to really change how this turn plays out. But not changing is the fact that the thing next to Dusclops is going to be redirecting.
Yeah, so Follow Me coming out from Indeedee, and maybe Eric kind of going for that. Instead, he actually goes for that Dragon Dance is going to be increasing, most importantly, that attack stat, while Mimikyu goes for a play rough into the Indeedee, and this time a Will-O-Wisp coming out from Dusclops, not targeting that Mimikyu, but this time going into the Dragapult, also a little bit negating that Dragon Dance boost that the Dragapult just got. But again, there's currently like no Trick Room going up.
No, and here we see the mind games, you know, in the same way that both players decided to Trick Room on the same turn in Game 2. Both players decided not to Trick Room, thinking that maybe Mimikyu was going to set up the Trick Room for Tobias here, but not the case.
No, so another Follow Me here coming out from that Indeedee as Dragapult goes for another Dragon Dance here. Maybe he's really wanting to make sure that he starts doing a lot of damage here against that Dusclops, as it now does feel free to go for another Will-O-Wisp, this time going to be targeting that Mimikyu. So both physical attackers here on the field are currently burned. Ooh, and this time Mimikyu going for the Trick Room. So definitely a difficult position now for Eric to be in, especially with his Dragapult also being way faster with that +2 speed.
Yeah, exactly. So a great turn there for Tobias, getting the burn on that Mimikyu. Dragapult's now at effectively neutral attacking power, but that Indeedee is still on the field and still going to be able to redirect all those Ghost-type moves away from that Dusclops. So, you know, great turn there for Tobias, but you know, we've still got Disguise intact, we've still got Dragapult on the field, still going to be able to do some damage, so we're seeing quite a slow game at the start, but I think things are going to start picking up speed now with this Dynamax coming out.
Yeah, we are immediately now finally going to be revealing that Dynamax here, and it's going to be that Dragapult again that Eric really seems to like to go for the Dynamax with.
Yeah, exactly that. So Dynamax coming out there. Well, we'll see whether it's going for a Max Phantasm or just going straight for a Max Whirlwind, try to remove that Indeedee from the field.
Yeah, Indeedee going for a Psychic into the Mimikyu, making sure that this time the disguise of the Mimikyu is going to be broken, meaning that hopefully later on he's a little bit easier for him to take out the Mimikyu. So a Max Phantasm coming out from Dragapult. Not enough here to pick up the KO on that Dusclops, just doing just a little bit over half damage, but it will lower the defense of both the Dusclops and the Indeedee. While Dusclops this time goes for Trick Room itself, so all these Trick Room mind games coming into play. So Mimikyu also going for that Trick Room again.
Man, this Trick Room mind game is so significant in this game, and we're seeing the players sync up and then do something different, and now they're syncing up again. So Trick Room's been reset. There was previously 3 more turns of Trick Room, but now there's 4 again. So again, great for Tobias, managing to remove the disguise on the Mimikyu, so going to be under threat now from Indeedee in Psychic terrain, launching those big Psychics, and Dusclops deciding to go for a Pain Split here.
Yeah, something that we've seen it do a lot and do it very well. So the Indeedee goes for another Psychic into the Mimikyu, not enough to pick up the KO, but definitely bringing it into the red, meaning probably any follow-up attack will be enough. So this time Dragapult does pick up the KO on that Dusclops for the first time, I believe.
Yeah, and will we see a Trick Room coming out from this Mimikyu? Here we go, Trick Room. So really brave play there from Eric, twice in a row going for a Ghost-type move in front of Indeedee, and really trusting that that Mimikyu was going to survive the turn. Follow Me wasn't going to come out in the same way that it did in the previous turn, and undoing the Trick Room. Now Eric is in the front foot. That Indeedee has had its defenses lowered as well, so going to be under threat from that Dragapult. But hey, we've got something else on the field now that can Trick Room, so the mind games are not going to stop just yet.
Now we are going to see that Hatterene join the field. You know, Eric does kind of have to worry. He does have 2 burned Pokemon on the field, meaning that his damage output is just really not going to be doing as much. So with that, Indeedee is still on the field, still has that opportunity to go for Follow Me now and kind of reset a Trick Room again.
Exactly, and Tobias still has his Dynamax or Gigantamax available. We saw Hatterene is a Gigantamax form, so likely to be carrying Trick Room. Maybe if he sets it up again, could be going down that route again. Of course, we talked about chip damage on the Dragapult. It's taken definitely some chip damage in this game, so if Tobias is able to get into Trick Room, that Dragapult is going to be under serious threat.
Yeah, so the Indeedee isn't going to be going for that Follow Me, redirecting any moves. Dragapult opting to go for that Max Whirlwind is going to be enough to pick up the knockout there on that Indeedee.
It is lowering the attack stat of the Hatterene on Tobias' side of the field, but not likely to do anything really.
Yeah, Mimikyu going for that Phantom Force, going to make sure that it's going to vanish for a turn, while in the next turn it's going to actually now has kind of another turn where it's not going to be able to attack, since that Hatterene just went for Trick Room, so it's going to be moving later than whatever Pokemon probably Tobias is going to be bringing in.
Exactly, and that Mimikyu on low HP, in range of being knocked out from the burn, so is going to reappear probably quite late in this turn, certainly after the Hatterene and Rhyperior move. Getting off this last attack, making sure that Hatterene can't go for a Protect, but if it decides to Dynamax, could go for a Max Guard, make sure that Mimikyu leaves the field, brings Eric down a Pokemon, and have to reveal some of the things that he's got in the back, because, Tobias has lost his Dusclops, but Eric hasn't lost anything yet.
Yeah, so Tobias is going to be going for its own Dynamax or Gigantamax, depending on, we are going to see that Gigantamax here coming out. So possibly, like we were just talking about, something like Smite, the G-Mass move Smite is going to be able to pick up the knockout on that Dragapult, possibly, if that's what Tobias decided to go for. And exactly that's what we're going to see this time, is going to be enough to pick up here the knockout on that Dragapult. So Tobias finally taking his first knockout of this game,
and the Mimikyu has been unfortunately confused, so may not even be able to get off the Phantom Force, but there it is, going into the Hatterene, losing some HP from its Life Orb, and going back to Eric for a 2 Pokemon knockout this turn.
Yeah, so Eric here now is going to have to reveal which last 2 Pokemon that he brought. One of them is going to be that Snorlax, which quite likes being in Trick Room. The other one is going to be that Rotom Wash.
Yeah, and the question is, that Snorlax, what move is it going to use? Is it going to go straight in for that Rhyperior, or is it going to go after the Gigantamax Hatterene? Both Pokemon are a real threat. We've got 3 more turns of Trick Room left, so some big decisions here for Eric to be made. And really, from Eric's perspective, he's just got to make sure he picks the right move every time, whether that's protecting, attacking into the right slots, and making sure that he does as much damage, so that once the Trick Room is gone, Rotom's in a great position to make sure it's able to pressure the Rhyperior, or Snorlax is able to pressure the Hatterene. Yeah,
Hatterene here going for another Smite here onto that Rotom. Just enough to pick up the KO, so no stalling Trick Room. It's sadly just going to be already leaving the field here. It's also going to confuse that Snorlax, which might be important later, but we're going to see Rhyperior go for that Rock Slide, which we know it does very, very well. Is able to connect and get that flinch.
Yeah, so we're seeing the combination here of Rock Slide and Confusion there, trying to stop Snorlax from doing anything in this turn. And of course, what's the best way to win a game? It's by not taking damage at all, and that's exactly what Tobias is going for. Hatterene does go back to its normal form as Eric forfeits the game, and we have your winner of round 7, going to be probably moving on to day 2, Tobias Koschitzki.
Yeah, he's made very, very well. He's really, I think, adjusted after kind of how game 1 went. We saw this amazing Trick Room mind games in both game 2 and 3.
Yeah, exactly, and those are so difficult to play. Going back to some of the earlier tournament formats we had, 2013, way back in the day, where you had Cresselia on every team, that was Trick Rooming maybe 4 or 5 times a game, and that's exactly what we saw, a little bit of a repeat of that, where both players deciding, they want to be in control of the speed, but unfortunately, the way that Trick Room interacts, it is an absolute mind game of what happens, and of course, if you get it wrong, Trick Room either stays up or doesn't stay up for a long period of time.
Yeah, that's definitely, Tobias was able to kind of switch it around with, kind of calling it correct, but also something that seemed to be really important was the way that he used Pain Split on his Dusclops.
Definitely, and that Pain Split, keeping the Dusclops on the field and healthy, so important. Dusclops takes so many hits, and, eventually it can win games on its own. So, yeah, really good play there just from both players. And of course, this could have gone absolutely either way. At the end of the game, we're playing mind games. This is Pokemon at the top level. You know, both players having to see exactly what they need to do to win a game and how they do it. Well, in this game, Trick Room and Dragapult being in its Dynamax form was the name of the game. Unfortunately, not quite enough for Eric to take the win, though.
Yeah, exactly. So we can actually ask Tobias during an interview how he kind of felt during those mind games, what was going on in his head. So we are going to be right back with this winners interview.
Here at the Pokémon 2020 Malmö Regional Championships with your winner from round 7, Tobias Koschitzki. You are 7-0, likely going to be going into day 2. How do you feel?
Yeah, honestly, I feel great. I played against Eric Rios, who is a well-known player, and like you saw, that mind games was coming in this game was like crazy.
Yeah, not necessarily a matchup that you want to go up a player as well decorated as Eric. Speaking of mind games, there was a lot of trick room going on in that set. So, you know, how did you approach going into that mind game where both you and Eric could both set up and reverse the trick room?
Like, firstly, I didn't know if his Mimikyu actually has trick room, so I wanted to scout for that. Because I saw like Shadow Sneak, Play Rough, and Phantom Force. So I was considering trick room as his last move. It was kind of obvious. Actually, Bulldoze on Dusclops would have helped me a lot to break the disguise, because like with Brick Break, I can't hit his ghost type. Or even if I get Trick Room up and he has Mimikyu with Disguise intact, he can always like reverse the Trick Room.
Yeah, that mind game kind of just stayed in play because you weren't able to break that disguise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there was quite a lot of adjustment going on through the set, and one of the adjustments was where that crucial moment in game 1 where G-Max Smite from your Hatterene didn't quite make the KO on the Dragapult. So, but you adjusted in game 2 and made it work for you. So what was your thought process going into that game, game 1 to game 2?
In game 1, I target down Dragapult with G-Max Smite, and it survived, and I didn't expect it at all, because I KO'd like every Dragapult in practice, even if Dynamax, and we talked afterwards, and he is actually Carl to lift that.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, if I get the confusion right there, then I'm in pretty good position, but it's 30%, so I can't complain on that.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. You know,
so
but you have to play for those outs, and of course.
So sometimes you have to play, and it's a good win condition, I guess. So I was like, yeah, okay. In game 2, I will bring in Viperia. I also led with Butterfree. He KO'd it quite easily again, and brought Viperia. Then I brick backed into my Viperia and Dyna crowned it into Dragapult, and he protected and reversed my Trick Room, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
That looks kinda over, but he gave me an out because he Dyna Wormwinded into my Dusclops.
Yeah, that
in
was
game
quite a crucial turn,
in game
wasn't
2,
it? Yeah.
because he was expecting to KO it. I wasn't sure if it would KO. But yeah, with that play I got Trick Room back again, and like you said, my team depends on Trick Room. I need to get up Trick Room, and sometimes you have to play these mind games.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the Butterfree there, going for the redirection that you opted for, but in game 3 you switched that up to Indeedee. Obviously you have 2 different ways to redirect attacks away from Dusclops, so what was the reason that you did that in game 3 rather than sticking with the Butterfree?
Like, Indeedee in general is like a lot better against like Dragapult and Mimikyu, because it can't get hit by Ghost type, so he can't just freely Dyna Ghost into that. So, and all what Butterfree did, honestly, in game 1 and game 2 was,
It just get KO'd straight away.
It just get KO'd. So, I was like, yeah, Indeedee looks really fine against him because I can redirect, and I opted actually to burn his mons first, so his damage output wouldn't be that high. He counteracted that a bit with his Dragon Dances, but I got like kind of needed chip damage on that Dragapult, so
yeah,
I
just to make sure that Gigantamax G-Max Smite was able to pick up the knockout, which is exactly what you did at the end of game 3.
Yeah.
Tobias, have you got any shout-outs, anyone that you want to speak to or say thank you, anyone that you've worked with for coming into this tournament?
Yeah, I want to shout out like Dominic Scheffler and Faiz, and actually Yuki. A lot of people helped me with the team. Like, I was going into this tournament, I didn't feel confident with this meta because it just felt so offensive, and I built that team, and yeah, like worked with a lot of people, like Chris, who I know from beginning, like 2015. I got to know him in my first Pokemon tournament, so yeah. And I want to shout out my family.
Brilliant, thank you very much, and certainly lots of long-term friends formed in these tournaments.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for the moment, so again, congratulations, Tobias. We're going to go through a short break and we'll be back for your final round of day one in just a moment.